Welcome back to another episode of Test Don't Guess Tuesday. This is when I talk about clients that I have I'm seeing now or in the past that have been dealing with digestive issues. We've run a test called the GI map, which is a stool test that they take in the privacy of their own home and send it back to the lab. Then we both receive the results and we go over them together on a Zoom call, and we chart a course of action to get better. Remember, if you don't understand why you have digestive issues in the first place, what is off, how can you possibly fix it? So that's what we do here when we decipher some of these tests. I'm going to show you the inner workings of a client of mine and then what we've done to make some breakthroughs. So this week is really interesting. You're going to want to stay tuned. This was a 28-year-old woman. Main complaints were fatigue, constipation, brain fog, some vaginal candida, and she came to us and not really expecting that she had many GI problems, but when we got the test back, so let's take a look at that together. And welcome to the GI map. If you haven't seen this test before, it's your first time here. This is a 5-page test that's going to tell you the inner workings of your GI system. And we always start with page 1 here, which shows you the pathogens. Now, bacterial pathogens, parasitic pathogens, and viral pathogens. Note that if someone has had a viral infection that included some vomiting and diarrhea, you're going to see that show up at the very bottom. It doesn't show up often because most people aren't taking this test when they're actively ill. Parasitic pathogens will show up. I do have clients that travel overseas to India or the Caribbean, and they'll get traveler's diarrhea and they won't be able to clear it. We'll see that here in the parasitic pathogen section. But for this lady who came to visit, she had some pretty high levels of C. difficile. And C. diff generally causes really smelly, almost sometimes fruit-like smelling diarrhea. So for this client to be complaining mostly of constipation, it was a surprise. Now, after these test results came back and we revisited her intake, she got a little bit clearer about that constipation. And in fact, she was having bouts of constipation and diarrhea. And in fact, when she was having the diarrhea, it was very foul smelling. It was not fruit smelling, but when you have an infection, expect a difference in the smell in your stool. And she even said, like, I would leave the bathroom and come back and it was still really smelly, right? That's a problem. No shame, right? But just a really good indicator of a problem that's lurking deeper and needs to be taken care of. If you are that kind of person that you're embarrassed to poop in public because it smells to high hell, consider that it's not your fault. It's the bug's fault. In this case, it's the C. diff. So when I see this needs to be addressed right away. And we do that with some herbs that actually tackle the C. diff. Okay, this is page 2 of the GI map test, which shows us opportunistic and overgrowing microbes. And this is divided into many sections. So let's go through this. As you can see, it's lit up like a Christmas tree. There is a lot of overgrowing happening for this client. So at the very top, dysbiotic and overgrowth bacteria, these are the ones that we do not want to see high. And here you can see out of 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, out of 9, 6 of them are high, and some of them are significantly high. So there is a raging overgrowth happening, we see. Then we kind of break it down. When we get to commensal overgrowth bacteria, we see that she's high in the Methanobacteriaceae species. That often points to some SIBO right in the small intestine. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was driving some of that constipation, some of that brain fog. Those levels also need to come down. When you look at inflammatory and autoimmune related bacteria, these are very concerning. We know that these bacteria, when they're found in high levels, lead to autoimmune diagnoses. I'm going to say that again. When things are off in your gut, they are the drivers for autoimmune diseases. And here you can see Citrobacter, Klebsiella, Proteus, all very high. Especially we see a lot of rheumatoid arthritis when these levels are high. Moving down to, let's see, commensal inflammatory and autoimmune, right? So we covered that. I'm surprised by this test that there was no high level of candida, especially with the vaginal issues, but good to note that it hadn't become systemic yet. And no viruses, no cytomegalovirus or Epstein-Barr were present. The next page talks about H. pylori. Remember, H. pylori is a bacteria that burrows into the stomach lining, causes lots of problems in the stomach, as well as with constipation, can lead to a number of autoimmune diseases. Here she has no H. pylori, which is great news for her. And then we get down to the commensal and keystone bacteria. Remember, these are the guys that belong in our guts, the Bacteroidetes, the Akkermansia, the fecal bacterium. And so we take a look at what's happening here. Remember, when we do see a lot of bad overgrowth of those dysbiotic bacteria, it's not uncommon to see some of the good guys overgrown as well. So she has a very big overgrowing situation happening. However, fecal bacterium prausnitzi is very low. And we can do a lot of good for that bacterial level simply by eating kiwi. So I would have her eating kiwi in the mornings a few times a week. And if you look at the bottom here, it's showing you the phyla, Bacteroidetes, and Firmicutes are both substantially high, which just is showing rampant overgrowth. So here I would use some broad-based, broad-spectrum antibacterial herbal remedies to bring all of these numbers down with a little bit more focus on some of those drivers for autoimmune disease, right? Because if we catch those early, and she is asymptomatic, no signs of rheumatoid arthritis right now, but she's young. So imagine that you let this situation brew over time. She's headed for a disaster. So with the very low list of symptoms that she has and this massive showing on her test, we can do so much preventative good for her by treating her now. And here is the most important for me is the intestinal health markers, right? Because while things can be brewing, this page is really telling us overall what the situation is. The above section with parasites, nothing present there, which is great. Also, please note, just because this test says you don't have parasites doesn't mean you don't. I had negative parasites on my GI map test. I had a colonoscopy and endoscopy looking for issues, asked the doctor to specifically look for parasites, none were seen. Then I embarked on a 4-month parasite and heavy metal detox and passed a massive tapeworm, along with quite a few other guys. So parasites are very, very difficult to detect for. That's just an aside. Intestinal health markers, steatocrit and elastase showing us the level of pancreatic enzymes, how well we're processing fats. Here, this client's doing well for both. GI markers, beta-glucuronidase is telling me how she's doing with hormones. According to the intake, she has regular periods and no hormonal issues at the moment. Remember that constipation over time can lead to backup of estrogen, and we tend to see that here in this marker, but it's not raised, so I'm not as concerned. No blood in her stool, that's the occult blood test. Secretory IgA is inching low. You see 510 is the low end of normal. This means that because your immune system starts in your gut, right? All of those immune markers coming from your gut, and this is showing us that the immune system down. Anti-gliadin IgA, remember that is showing us if she's sensitive to gluten. She reported she's not, and this test is confirming that. Eosinophil activation protein is talking a little bit here about inflammation, calprotectin, stomach gut lining. While that's inching up, we're not there yet. So you see there is a lot of room for her to go downhill, but by addressing these issues first, and I think it's going to take time, probably a minimum of 10 weeks on some good, potent killers. And that's in fact what we did. So we put her on some biocidin. They have a great 30-day protocol that I repeated twice with her. That is a biocidin liquid that has lots of herbs in it that are killers, olive leaf extract supplement, their detox binder called GI Detox. And I think there's a 4th product in that kit. Olive Rex, GI Detox, biocidin, Maybe that's it. So we did that for her. We did replace some good bacteria. She did switch to eating kiwi first thing in the morning. We did make some dietary changes as well. We repeated this test actually 6 months down the line because she was in treatment with us for almost 4 months. And when we repeated it, there was much more balance, right? You saw that Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes level balance out and all come down. The bad guys came down, the good guys that were up came down, everything regained balance. We never got to the root of her vaginal dysbiosis, but when we cleared up her gut, remember the vaginal microbiome, the gut microbiome, they work hand in hand. So by clearing up her gut, the vaginal issues resolved, brain fog much better, fatigue lifted. Healing the gut is the way, my friends. Start there. If you don't know, if you're not well and you don't know where to start with this test. You can order this test now on your very own at digestivediscovery.com. I set up the whole thing for you, so you slide into the back end of my lab portal and you order that test for yourself. You'll be able to follow along with these Test Don't Guess Tuesday reviews to have some understanding about what reading a GI map is like. But within that Digestive Discovery program, there's tons of information for you on where to start and how to read and what we should be doing with diet. Lots of tips there. So I hope you enjoyed. This was a really complex case. Again, a client who could have been a lot worse off had we not dealt with this in a timely manner. And now she is well and living a vibrant life. And I want that for you too. Reach out if you need help. melissahallklopacki.com is my website, or order the test for yourself at digestivediscovery.com. Stay well. See you next week.